I glanced at my sleeping wife, then unbuckled her seatbelt as we sped down the highway. Closing my eyes, I pressed the gas pedal all the way down. We once had a happy life until that day when my wife helped our neighbor dye her hair. In the middle of their chat, she suddenly froze. Our son called her name again and again before she finally came to her senses. Later, she took our granddaughter to the park for a swing, but came back alone, leaving the child behind. Sensing something was wrong, she went to the hospital on her own. The diagnosis was vascular dementia. When she returned home, she asked our son if we could go on a family trip, a dream she had cherished for years. But he had an upcoming job interview, so he promised to take us to Sonia once he earned enough money. That night, I smelled something burning. I rushed to the kitchen and saw her standing there, confused and lost. That was when I realized how serious things had become. The next day, I went to the hospital to ask about her condition. The doctor told me it could worsen at any time. As I left the building, my phone rang. My wife had gone missing. We searched everywhere, and late that night, she came home on her own. But the gentle woman I knew suddenly lashed out at me. In anger, I told our son to send her to a care facility. He did to the worst one he could find. I slapped him in fury and brought her to a better place myself. Once he saw the environment, my son finally felt at ease. My wife didn't want to stay, but she didn't want to burden us either. Without her, our home fell apart. My daughter-in-law worked late every day, my son was busy job hunting, and no one even had time to cook. I thought that would just be our new normal until an old friend called. His wife had passed away suddenly. He told me what it was like to lose the person who had shared his whole life. That conversation struck me deeply. I couldn't let my wife spend her last days in that place. So I brought her home. Whatever came next, we would face it together. To fulfill her wish, I took the whole family on a trip. For a while, we laughed and smiled again. Even I, who rarely smiled, felt warmth in my heart. But happiness didn't last. My wife had another episode. She tried to heat milk for our granddaughter, but the scalding liquid spilled everywhere. My daughter-in-law shielded the child and was burned herself. My wife, confused and frightened, thought someone was taking the baby away. She grabbed my daughter-in-law by the hair and wouldn't let go until my son bit her hand to make her stop. Shaken and furious, my daughter-in-law took the child and left. That night, I called my wife into the car and showed her a video. It revealed the truth. I too had been diagnosed with dementia. I had soiled the car at night and forgotten everything. I told my son the next morning to take his wife and child far away, to live freely without the weight of our illnesses. He hugged my wife tightly, his eyes full of helplessness. After they left, I sold the taxi I'd driven for half my life. With that money, my wife and I lived quietly, just the two of us. We became like young lovers again. We left notes on the wall to communicate when our minds were clear. We cared for each other as best we could, but my condition grew worse. I ate clumsily like a child, wet myself in the living room, and once called the police because I thought my taxi had been stolen, even though I sold it months ago. One night, my wife locked the door and left a note behind. The next morning, I bought back my old taxi and took her on one last drive. She smiled the whole way. For a moment, it felt like the world had turned gentle again, but soon her head began to ache. As she drifted into sleep, I looked at her peaceful face, torn between love and resolve. I stepped on the gas, but before anything could happen, the police stopped us on the highway. At home, our son